So we were talking about energy and and results and that got me thinking about our next question. What's the first step for someone looking to transition into a new field without necessarily starting over completely?
Yeah, well, this is a really tricky one, and frankly, I've tried and failed multiple times, which is why I'm still in healthcare, right? Which I'm actually happy to be here still, but I've tried a few times in my career, particularly where I've had sort of transition points in time. So I go back to my first time I was retrenched, at Janssen, right, which was, I mentioned it was my first role. So I did like 8 fantastic years and then was retrenched. And at that point, I was like, okay, everyone's going into IT, so maybe I'll go into IT.
So you just talked about retrenched casually there.
Yeah,
because some people get retrenched and they think the world has ended, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, funny enough, my two retrenchment times in my career have actually spurred me on to greater success, actually. So maybe we come back to that after I finish my point.
Guys, did you hear that?
And at the point of my first retrenchment experience, when I was exiting Johnson & Johnson, Janssen Pharmaceuticals, at the time my head was kind of pulled in one direction. Like, all these guys are doing IT consulting, they're making loads of money. Can you do programming? If you can program, you're gonna make loads of money. And I was like, okay, maybe I want to go into IT. I've never done IT before in my life. I don't think in zeros and ones. I think in continuous numbers. I'm a commercial person versus a technical person sat behind a computer. So I signed up and did signed up to do a part-time computer science master's, and dropped out by Christmas. So that was one of my failed attempts to kind of pivot and change. And I'll come back to the relevance of this. There will be points in your time where there's an opportunity to potentially pivot. And to your point, particularly if you've got to a reasonable, you've had a number of steps in your career, and you're doing well, you're becoming established, you become an expert in your field or well recognized, and you clearly don't want to go back to internship and building your new reputation in a new organization. So I think there's a couple of things that you've got to look at doing. I think the first one is to expose yourself to that new area, right? And you can do that through academics, so like I did pick up a computer. I mean, it would have made sense if I picked up maybe a healthcare digital course, right? Which could have got me somehow into IT and transition versus going into a pure computer science course. But I think, again, it's a good kind of indicator. So try and pick from an academic certificate, qualification certification. It doesn't have to be a master's, it could be professional certification, if you're trying to pivot into that discipline. So you can pick up some of that so you get some core academic, theoretical understanding of that space. And then what you can do is try and combine that with some stretched assignments in the role that you're doing, right? Because again, if you work for an organization or even if you work for a family business, again, sticking with my example, I'm sure there would be something that a healthcare, pharmaceutical guy with a little bit of coding knowledge now could do for the business. So go knock on the IT department's door and sit down with the CIO and say, hey, look, I'm super interested in computers and IT. I'm working in pharmaceuticals, in the pharmaceutical division. Are there any projects that are, that I could get involved in? And then you could maybe get involved in the rollout of the CRM system, and roll it out with the sales team in the field. So you're getting into the IT kind of side, but you're also engaging with your core role. So I think there's the academic piece, and then there's the kind of stretch the time where you can start pulling in those new skills as you start trying to transition. And then when you have that, particularly if you're already in a leadership role and you've got some people leadership experience, then you're now going in as a people leader that's done projects in that new discipline as part of your role in regards to stretched assignments, and you've got some certifications or some qualifications to back it. And I think you put yourself in a much better chance to be able to engage at an equivalent level that you are today, or you might have to take a little bit of a step back, but you're not going to go back to the starting point.
You know what you're explaining is helping me think about a question that somebody sent in around growth and reinvention for mid-career professionals. And the person asked that many of them at a mid-career level sometimes hit plateau.
Yeah.
What strategies do you think will help them reinvest themselves to stay relevant?
Yeah. It's on you.
Aha!
It's absolutely on you. No one's gonna, particularly in mid-career, no one's gonna spoon feed you this, right? It's super important to keep on learning, gaining more knowledge, gaining more technical expertise, staying abreast of the most recent developments, and that's reading, that is watching, that's online. You've got to keep on being, I don't want to say relevant, but you want to keep on knowing and understanding of how things move, right? And maybe I can kind of give you an example. In one of my roles that I had, a similar mid-career guy. He'd done pretty well, but he had operated in what I would say would be an old autocratic way of leadership.
Aha.
Right? And that had got him as far as he had, right? But then when you start, as you grow in your career, you start recruiting people that are younger than you, right? And we all know what the more newer generations are like in regards to. And these guys are brilliant, by the way. Like the younger. I think I'm a Gen Z. I'm a Gen. No, I'm not a Gen Z. I'm a Generation X, I think.
Oh no, I thought we were talking about the younger people.
But your Zs, your Alphas, these guys are like unbelievable in what they can do. Like the knowledge that they have, the creativity, the fearlessness that the Zs and the Alphas have are just on complete another level. But you can't manage them in an autocratic way. That's just, they just don't respond to that way of leadership, So if you're this guy who has always managed, and I say managed on purpose versus led, has managed in a specific way, and at that time I'm a second line manager, so I'm trying to coach this leader in how he needs to adapt his style, how he needs to move to more, I would say, modern ways of leading. Become a people leader versus a manager, and they're two very different things. But he just wasn't able to kind of get with it, right? And then ultimately he exited the organization. So I give you that example because he needed to stay current and relevant in leadership. He needed to stay current and up to date on what are the new ways to lead, to develop people. How do you keep a new generation engaged and motivated to want to continue to work in that organization, right? So there was a lot of work that he needed to do. Some people will say, well, why didn't the company put him on a training course? I mean, we could have done, but he needed to take ownership of that because ultimately it's his career. And I say that to everybody, you've got to take ownership of your own development and go ask, and yes, there's a responsibility for the company to make sure that you're competent and can do your job, but there isn't necessarily a responsibility to make sure that you become the CEO of tomorrow, right? From an L&D perspective, leadership and development perspective. But if you want to be the CEO of the future, you're gonna have to own that. So I think mid-career is trying to stay on top of it, right?
Yes.
Mid-career it's all about keeping yourself updated, keeping yourself current, keeping yourself in a space where you adapt to the new environment around you, and with that will then lead you to greater opportunities, be it internally or be it within other organizations.
So what would you say are the most underrated career success habits that professionals often overlook?
Underrated storytelling. I think a story can really tell and share in a much more easier digestible way. So being able to tell stories, I think, is super important. I think being open, transparent and vulnerable, I think, is another way of being that really builds trust and can help really change and drive and win hearts and minds when you're on a journey. I think being super open to feedback and hearing it and not be afraid of it. And the term feedback is a gift. I think my first leadership training course, someone said that to me, and it's kind of lived with me throughout my career. Feedback is a gift, and sometimes it's very hard, and sometimes it's difficult, but it's a gift, and you can take from that piece of. No one's saying you take every piece of feedback. No, I mean, you can't change the essence of you as a human being, but there will be nuggets in the feedback that enable you to adapt and change to the environments. So those are a couple of things that immediately come to mind.
Wow. So, talking about feedback, maybe we can segue to overcoming setbacks and building career. All of us, we all face setbacks in our career. How can professionals turn challenges into growth opportunities?
Yeah, look, I mean, do you turn them or are they? As I said earlier, failure is an opportunity, right? Change is an opportunity. So, do you psychologically embrace that opportunity, or do you run away and hide from that opportunity? And as we said, at 2 points in my career, I was retrenched. Most recently, I exited GE. Yes, I exited GE as a mutually, but I felt I still had another year maybe to give to that business. So I think my exit was slightly premature, but was understandable and okay. And in both of those scenarios, I used the opportunity to do something different, which has changed the course of my career positively, right? So my first one, where at Johnson & Johnson, opened me up to move out of pharmaceuticals into medical devices. So I was retrenched, and again, I was blessed and lucky that within a couple of months, I was able to secure a role in a medical device organization called Smith & Nephew. And that opened up a whole different part of the healthcare ecosystem that I had no visibility of. What was also super important about that change, in pharma was heavily resourced, so you had somebody or a department that did everything along the chain, so if you needed to deal with regs, you had a regulatory department. If you needed to deal with finance, you had a finance person. If you needed to do with clinical research, you had a clinical research person. So you had department divisions that pretty much did almost everything across the value chain or the sales chain within a pharmaceutical business. In medical devices, it's a very different space.
Right.
If you go looking for a clinical person to help you with the clinical data to present to an orthopedic surgeon, there's no one, right? It's on you. Go find the paper, go read the paper, understand it, go present it. If you're looking for somebody to understand what the regulations are for X, we had one regulatory person in Janssen. We had probably 10 regulatory people. We had one regulatory person in Smith and Nephew, and their job was, you know, at a very high level. So if there's a issue in a specific country where you need to figure out how do I get a product in or get a product out, you better go read about it, right? Go online. So that move taught me a lot of things that were particularly useful when I moved to Africa, which is self-reliance, you know, being a complete professional and owning all aspects of what you're trying to do, if that makes sense. So yes, my core role when I moved to Smith & Nephew was a regional manager, you know, managing a team of sales representatives and clinical experts, which was great. So that was my leadership skills, my clinical and commercial, medical commercial skills that came into play. But at the same time, I learned about, you know, clinical marketing. I learned about working in retail pharmacies and how you engage in retail pharmacies and how do you get products, OTC products or prescription products into pharmacies. I learned about how clinical nurses are different from salespeople, right, or commercial salespeople, and how you motivate a clinical nurse to be commercially successful versus how you motivate a salesperson that's core to be successful are two different worlds, right? So my point is that change, that retrenchment, put me into a role that taught me a whole bunch of skills that I would never have had access to if I'd continued in the pharmaceutical space, you know? And that's why I say that tough times or change or retrenchments or, you know, shocks to your career, it's important to embrace them as opportunities to do things different, to change, to take a different perspective or a different path, because you're going to learn something new from that new experience.
I'm hearing so much insightful stuff that I'm tempted to ask you what mindset shifts help people overcome fear and take bold career steps.
Yeah, right. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. How do you overcome fear? I don't know, man. You're the doctor. You've
been giving us some insights about the mindset. Look at the pillars that you've been bringing to us. Because there's something there that people who are watching can learn from. Because the mindsets that have brought you to this place is something people should not take for granted. Yeah. And I'm hearing you share them. And that's why I had to pull you back at some point.
Yeah, I could talk about me, right?
Please do.
I'm sure there's a paper out there that maybe I should go find and have a read about how you become fit. But I think that the essence, and again, why I started with my background, right, was important, because I think the fear of failure was something that was a big part of my upbringing, right? So, you know, full transparency, you know, my mother in the UK built up, you know, probably £1 million portfolio of properties as a single mum nurse in the UK, and then became bankrupt and lost everything.
Wow.
And this was while I was at university, actually. So what that did to me was that it created a determination in myself that no matter how tough things get, no matter how difficult things are, you've got to keep pushing, you've got to keep fighting, you've got to keep driving through because things will change. And that positive engagement, that positive mindset is half of the battle, right? If you become defeated and insular and start questioning yourself, and there's no, you should self-reflect, right? I'm not saying that you're completely arrogant, no, but if you let that crush you, it becomes very difficult to drive on. And I think that the essence of seeing that upbringing, coming from a second generation of immigrant parents, and you see this in immigrants in general, right? That fight and determination. I lived in Nigeria for 8 years. You see under extreme difficult environments, you know, the last 4 unicorns have come out of Nigeria, right? On the continent, you know, because that determination that you come from struggle or difficult backgrounds really give you that you know, I cannot break, I must continue, I've got to stay positive, I've got to keep pushing forward. And whatever background you come, if you can take the essence of that, which is, you know, things will be tough in careers, things will be tough in life, right? But just try and at core be yourself, be positive, enter into things with the most positive intent that you can. And if you get things wrong, be open to apologize and fix bridges that get broken. Because you cannot thrive in a career in a competitive world that we live in without having some constructive conflict and some friction, right? But I think what I've tried to do is, when that's happened, is always go back and try and build bridges, you know, and make people understand where you're coming from. And I think if you come with those approaches, I think that really can help you go forward when things get tough.
Wow. Guys, I really hope this has brought some illumination that hopefully will help you flourish 360. This coaching, mentoring, and leadership conversation is now approaching its end, which is why I would ask our distinguished guest if you could leave our audience with just one piece of advice, career-wise, what will it be?
Just one. Authenticity. Be you, be yourself, and you can't win by yourself. You know, in anything that you do, it's all about the team, the people around you. So if you can be authentic and empowering and humble and enable your team, however that team is, whether you lead them directly or whether they're your colleagues. For me, those are the key things for you to be successful. Because essentially you can never do, very few people are able to be successful by themselves. Right? There always is a team or a group of individuals around that person that makes them successful. So that would be it. Authenticity.
I mean, there are people who've listened to this, who've heard you. If they would like to connect with you or learn more about you, where can they connect with you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm relatively active on there. So feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. I don't use X, Twitter. I didn't use it before. I'm definitely not using it now. Sorry. But probably LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me. And
there you have it, guys. That's coaching, mentoring, and leadership conversation with Ayoung Ibai, the immediate past managing director for GE Healthcare. Thank you so much, my good sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And to our partners who have supported us with Supreme Beverage at Organo. They bring the treasures of the earth to the people of the world. Until next time, when I, Joshua Awesome, come with another distinguished guest on Flourish 360, the Coaching, Mentoring, and Leadership Lab, I'd like to say to you, please continue to take care of your mind and take charge of your life. Bye for now.